Good morning, Justin. How are you today?
Morning, Josh. I'm doing well. How about you?
Sitting in the dark, man. I just went to the eye doctor and had my eyes dilated, so
Oh,
like
dang.
everything hurts.
I didn't think that they did that as often or as they used to now.
I don't know. My eye doctor insists on it, and
Okay. Yeah.
I detest it, but I like eyes, so I deal with it.
Yeah. No, I've had it done before too. It's a weird
It's
like
horrible.
sensation and experience. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's really bright because I live in Wisconsin, and we've gotten 20 inches of snow over the last 8 days. And the sun is out and it is like bright as hell outside right now. So like I have a horrible
Yeah.
headache as well.
Oh no. Yeah.
Oh well.
Yeah.
What can
Wow.
you do? That's
Man,
life.
I didn't realize it's because it's starting to warm up a little bit here in the DC area. So that's crazy. Yeah. Well, I hope it gets better for you and quickly.
That'll be all good. Oh, good morning, Kate.
Yeah, yep. Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm hanging in there. I have my eyes dilated, so I'm sitting in the dark.
Oh, that's why. Okay, very
Not a lot of fun, but it's okay.
good. Did Brian reach out to you about the blog post?
I have maybe not specifically. There was
Okay.
I volunteered to write a blog post as part of a different thread about SBOM everywhere, but I don't know if that was what you're asking about.
Yeah, well, so we got a starting point from the TNG guys about everything pretty much being there and ready for people to start working with.
That
And
blog post. No,
and
not
Brian and it was written too low a level from Brian's perspective, and so he was volunteering you, I think, to
yeah,
write the
that's
blog
fine.
post.
I'd be happy to.
Have you been given access to the document that they've got right now?
Nope.
Fine. I will connect them right now, and then if you want to sit and work on the blog post today, I will happily chime in from the sidelines and to help try to push this through so we can get this up there yesterday. Type of deal. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Excuse me for being frustrated, but the code's been ready for over a month.
Nice. That's awesome.
And the more people that can bang on it right now and help us find any issues, the solider it'll get. The other thing that is happening in the code base is they are working on prototyping the 3.0 model right now.
Oh,
And
nice.
so we're getting the JSON prototyping going on in parallel, and they're looking for people to participate on that too. If there's
That's just Python, or are you looking for other languages also?
Oh, we'll be looking for other languages too. If there's someone who's got, skills and to try out the model and try out the modeling and the serializations for the modeling in the other languages, yes, please. But wanted to at least have one place where we could make it solid and put things in front of people.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay.
Nice. Man, there's like nobody here today.
Yeah. Well, in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to be at Embedded World, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to join then.
Where's Embedded World at?
Nuremberg.
Oh, there's worse places to go.
Yeah, there's definitely worse places to go. There's a lot of people at Mobile World Congress this week, so that may be part of what's happening here too.
Gotcha.
Um,
Well, and the embedded stuff is so interesting because it's so weird and different from everything we do.
No, it's not. It's very sensible. It's all the perspective we come at this from, I think.
I'm not saying it's not sensible, but you figure from the typical SBOM perspective, we have easy access to knowing what our artifacts are, but from the embedded space, I mean, they want to take as much out as they can. So who knows what's even in that after the build.
Well, this is why you have an SBOM, because you can get it. And, we've got examples of this. Oh, hey, Emily. Welcome.
Hey Kate. Thank you.
No, I agree though. I think embedded is like the perfect use case for generating an SBOM during the build.
Yep.
Like it's exactly what you need.
And we've got 2 examples out there of it already happening in the wild.
Oh, really? Who's
Oh,
doing
cool,
that?
yeah. Zephyr's been doing it for about 2 years now.
Okay.
And in fact, they generate 3 S-bombs out on every build. So just a second here. Let me open up a window and I'll start to give you guys a bit of a tour. If there's nothing else while we're waiting for other people to join.
Yeah, we can wait a few minutes. It's still really light, so I'd love to see.
Okay, just a second. I need to clean my desktop up though, because it's better to do this with the desktop share, I'm afraid.
I know, that's always my fear. It's like I feel like my desktop is like a hovel, and if I share it, then people judge me.
Oh, yeah. I think that's definitely the case. Just a second. I'm moving a few things over and there. Hide that window. And this. Okay. Okay. So. Just gonna do the desktop. And you've got everything here. So this is a dashboard that one of the members of the Zephyr project has put together. And there's 5 applications that get built on top of Zephyr, since Zephyr's an OS. And as part of this, and there's over 400 boards in it right now. Okay. But including some things in RISC-V, as well as most of them being ARM boards and things like that. But as you go to some of them, you'll see that they're either past, built, or generated. And anything that's built in past for certain, what you can do is if you download it here, you basically download a zip file, and this will have the binary image. And if you open up that zip file, just terminal. Oops, not that. Sorry, I want the downloads. Coming down still. Oh. Okay. Well, something's wrong with my download.
That's okay. But I assume it's got what, SPDX inside of it, or?
Got 3 SP. So it's got its binary. It's got the ELF image. It's got a lot of the other some of the data around it, and then it also has 3 SBOMs in there. It has 2 source SBOMs, 1 SBOM for the application, 1 SBOM for the Zephyr sources that were used in the build, and then 1 SBOM that's a build SBOM that links the .os back to the sources. So you can refer it into these other directories. It's very modular. Now it's coming around. I'm just being too impatient.
Nice.
And it has here are the intermediates that have been created from the build, the libraries, and then the final ELF image, and everything is linked together through a whole hierarchy. And this is there today.
Wow, that's really cool.
And so it was some instrumentation that happened in CMake as part of the West for the Zephyr build. And so that's there and is in use. The other place that's doing this is Yocto. And Yocto will also build it builds the SBOMs for the tool chain, and then it uses that tool chain to go and build the SBOMs for the components, and then it links all the components together. So we have 2 instances where, and there's a lot of Yocto distros out there right now, to put it mildly, and a lot of it Yocto and embedded. So it's already working fully in the embedded side. It's just that people may not be aware of it because they're all focusing on the server side.
Yeah, right. Nice.
But yeah, this is all there, and people can go and explore this. And then there's a variety of anyone who's sort of working with Yocto, and for both this and Yocto, this is running one command to sort of tell it to record some stuff before you do your build. So it's eminently scriptable. And in Yocto, it's changing some parameters in the config file for the build infrastructure. So it's not a big overhead, and you get it out automatically.
Wow, that's really cool. I had no idea. I will look at that now.
Okay.
And do you know, Kate, one last question. The
Sure.
Zephyr is their build system somewhere in the open? We can poke it with a stick?
Yeah, it's the build system for Zephyr is West, and it basically is a shell around CMake to make it easy for people to pull all the pieces in for an embedded module to build.
Nice.
Okay. And so here, let me show you the two. So there's this app one, and I think we did Dining Philosophers, and so it's a pretty small little SBOM here, where it just says, okay, it's got, gives it a namespace, and the combination of the namespace and the SPDX ID within that namespace, that's what makes it globally unique. So you can refer from one document to the next. Okay, so we're using the namespace linkage, and these are the app sources, and there's just a main file. So pretty small for the C files for the for this, but this is a source one. And then if you looked at your Zephyr one, again, this is another source one. You've got a lot more stuff. Again, it's got its own unique namespace, and it also has all the licensing clarified, and the files specifically from the .cs, which are all hashed, so you can you can do that. But the same way in the namespace and this ID, you can uniquely refer to things anywhere in the ecosystem. And then when you look at the build.spdx, you will see that there is an external document ref to the app one and to the Zephyr sources. And so you will see things are generated from the files in these types of sources. So that's how the linkage happens between these documents. And so you can be very modular about keeping information local to its own scope, which makes it much more understandable. And you have a prerequisite. So you have the prerequisites, and then you basically are, this has been generated from this .c. So your libapp.a was generated from the C, and this is how it was created. And then you have, handles and various things from the Zephyr sources, etc., and what the prerequisites were, and so forth. And so you're basically, looking at the core.a has been generated from exactly these files out of Zephyr repo.
Oh
you see there,
cool.
And you see it's document ref.zephyr, and then it's a reference into the C file. So that document ref you saw in the other thing, so we've got the linkage at the top to it. So you've got a global unique namespace, and here's the C file, and this .a brought in that .c file. And so you have the traceability, and included .s files as well, for that matter. So you have your core.a, and then you have a variety of other intermediate things that you're working on. And to cut a long story short, you eventually get your pre-zero, which has your various prerequisites, and then you have your ELF image, which is statically linking all these things together.
That is cool. Wow.
Okay. And we can do the same level already today on all the Yocto stuff too.
Nice.
Okay, so embedded's easy.
Well,
it's just everyone who has all their own package managers that's a pain and wants to do things on all their different own ways. So there you go.
Embedded's easy if you do some setups for it.
yeah.
Hi, Emily.
All right, let's get this show on the road. If everyone hasn't already, if you can sign in, the sign-ins in the agenda, I will paste that. Well, we sign in into the tools agenda, even though we mostly talk about SBOMs here. Yeah. But there is one more link to the agenda. Sign in if you haven't. And then the first item on the to-do is introducing yourself. I will paste my intro. That is not my intro. And then we'll get cracking. We're gonna Dan's the star of the show today. We are. Cool. All right. And then I'm happy to share my screen. As I'm slow today. I apologize to everyone. I had my eyes dilated a couple hours ago, and so seeing is hard. I'm sitting in the dark also, which reminds me of when I was much younger and sat in the dark all the time, but not anymore. So okay, cool. So here's the tool agenda. Before we go right into SBOM everywhere, does anyone have any tool specific items they want to bring up or share?
We're trying to have a tooling mini summit type of deal, SBOM tooling mini summit at Open Source Summit North America in Vancouver in May. So if you're interested in working on getting together to compare notes on tooling ports and things like that, by all means reach out. There'll be more details. We're trying for the Monday afternoon before the conference starts.
Okay. Oh, nice. And you said that's SBOM tooling specifically, or?
It's basically, we'll probably be focusing on the SBOM generation tooling using SPDX. If there are people who want to participate with others, they can let me know. But we'll probably try to focus it on moving the SPDX 3.0 stuff forward faster.
Cool. Awesome. That'll be fun. Good. All right. I'm going to jump to SBOM everywhere then, which everyone's introduced themselves. Okay. Let's start with the mobilization plan draft proposal here, which Dan, I will let you do most or all of the talking. And Sarah is not here at the moment, or at least I didn't see her yet. She said
she said she's running late. She has another commitment that is gonna but she might be able to join halfway through. The first half of this document is kind of notes. So if you scroll down a little bit,
gonna make it
here,
bigger
then you can find
Right.
I think where we started with problem statement is where we actually are. So again, this is trying to echo the approach that best practices took to their kind of mobilization plan statement, about and kind of restate a little bit what the work stream is going to work on. So Sarah and I worked on a problem statement document, or a problem statement, paragraph here, talking about the uncertainty. There's uncertainty in the ecosystem regarding the role that SBOMs play, the specific use cases they fill, and the way that they fit into the software development lifecycle. So this is all about seeking to clear up confusion, articulate consensus on and tech neutral view through member contributions and OpenSSF funded activities, right? So that's just basically bread and butter what we're trying to do. And I think that the point here about the tech neutrality is really something that I wanted to make sure that we talked about. The fact that what we do here has to make sense for the general category of SBOMs rather than any particular thing. So if we go down a little bit further to action plan, right. So the first thing was mapping this maps to other ways that we've also talked about this work, but mapping the SBOM landscape, all things SBOM, develop an SBOM landscape document. This is one of the things that I think as you indicated, we should be seeking funding on. And linked to standards, tooling, and SBOM user needs. So this is a key point that also links to the other agenda item that I put into today, I suggested for today, which was putting a real emphasis on documenting user needs from the perspective of different users of SBOMs, right? Because I think this is a conversation that we keep coming in against.
Mhm.
Yeah, when we
agree.
yeah, so like having a you know, I think some communities have already articulations of personas and user needs for SBOMs, but I think we really could do with bubbling that up and having this kind of higher level view of what those personas are and how the SBOMs are helping those people in each case. So that is what that bullet point 3 there is all about. User needs matrix, and talking about tooling, right? So I'm going to skip down to bullet point 2, which is establish an OpenSSF tool chain for SBOMs, right? And this is about, you know, coming back to the Sterling tool chain vision for OpenSSF, and you know, what does a tool chain mean? It could mean things that OpenSSF curates. It could mean things that are donated to OpenSSF. It could mean stuff that's out there in the community that we're just pointing to. And then so let me see here. And I didn't yet look at your suggestions, Josh. I have to say, I'm sorry, but if you want to speak to them, feel free.
Oh, no worries. Nothing I've said. I don't even remember now. Or at the moment. Oh, identify. Wait, which one did I put this on? Identify. Oh, contribute. Yeah, that one. Now that the way you just described this, I think I misread that, because you're talking about existing tools airlifted into the OpenSSF here, right?
Yes.
Versus creation of new tools. So I will.
I'm talking about things. Yeah, I'm not talking about creation of new tools. In fact, I don't think. Yeah, I am talking about, you know, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe if one of the member companies that is involved in this work stream already has an internal tool that they're using, then this work stream could be a way to encourage that member company to open source that tool and donate it to OpenSSF. So in that sense, it could mean the creation of new tools, but not as far as like we're going to create a new tool and, you know, and create an engineering team to create a new tool. I don't think that makes any sense.
Good, perfect. Yeah, I don't think we need more SBOM generators right now.
And then establishing SBOM best practices. So writing down best practices around the use of SBOMs.
Hold on, Dan, before we move on, Thomas raised his hand. Thomas, is your question related?
Yeah, just to note, I spoken to too many companies about their tools. There will be very few company tools opening their tools, because the problem is a lot of their tools are very company specific. And so what we have done is basically we have taken their ideas and incorporated in open source tooling. But as I said, I know I have to talk to, God knows, probably 40 to 50 companies over the last couple of years about SBOM tools. There will not be many more open sourced apart from some new effort, because it's so company specific. At least from the large kind of players that basically can build tools that are like enterprise quality, which is kind of, I think, what we're after.
Yeah, I mean, point taken. I think that it may. I was just pointing out a possibility under which it might look like we're creating a tool, but actually it's not. We're not creating a tool. We would be encouraging the contribution of some other person's tool, but only if it. Or some other organization's tool, but only if it's appropriate, and not specific to that organization, but applies across the industry. Okay, establishing SBOM best practices, writing down best practices around use of SBOMs. This is very much aligned with the work that the best practices working group is already doing. So I would see this as being kind of a joint piece of work, or and then SBOM education. So I think we need an SBOM primer that's aimed at, you know, that helps to educate the industry about what SBOMs are. And then we need to develop some educational, some outreach materials.
I would say that I think there's two personas that are very different here.
Mhm.
Sometimes I think it's the same person, but nonetheless, I think there's two pieces of evidence that you're aiming at here. The persona for a developer just cares of how do I do it, what do I do? The decision maker is how does this fit into a strategic view, and how is this going to save me money in the long run? And I think those are two different types of documents in education.
Yeah.
Before we go down this path, can I push back a little bit and ask because obviously I'm the last person opposed to education, but has this already been done?
Yeah, that's it too.
I mean,
Well,
we've got big government organizations who are already doing a lot of stuff in SBOMs, and I hate to redo things.
You've got big
done.
U.S. organizations that are already doing a lot in SBOMs.
Europe too. There's a lot of folks in Europe doing this. I mean, the CRA
yes.
is going to mandate this for everything. You know, they think that open source software projects will instantaneously provide them warranties at no charge, and are going to provide them all SBOMs. Problem solved.
I don't know. I mean, I've read a lot of that material, you know, and then I sat down and I saw this presentation, or a number of the presentations from that were given at FOSDEM around SBOMs, including the one from Siemens, which, you know, sticks out in my head. And, you know, they were saying stuff that I hadn't heard before, because it was about their specific use of SBOMs.
So, Dan, before you put too much into this, into some of their comments, when I talked to them behind the scenes on that whole thing, they're still defaulting back to SPDX over CycloneDX. They wouldn't say that on stage, but they need the license to the SPDX.
I'm not talking about SPDX versus CycloneDX. I'm just talking about like use cases, right? Like the fact that, like, for instance, Siemens were talking a lot about how they're using SBOMs for license compliance issues, because they have huge legal compliance issues around licenses. And so that's something that is a different take on SBOMs that if you read some of the other material that's available, you wouldn't see. So I think there's still a need to kind of bring together some of these use cases and user needs that are across different parts of the industry, and have them in a neutral space that is not a U.S. government space or a you know anyway, a more neutral space.
Right. Not one company and not one government.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Thomas has his hand up.
What is missing from the educational material, and it's like where I get so many questions about Europe, is actual practical processes. The applied knowledge of SBOMs. Generating SBOMs, yeah, that has been known. Why we need the SBOM, yeah, you can find it. But actually, how to apply it in your organization's processes, and who do you need to align with? That's the biggest gap.
How to generate, or how to consume?
Generate, pretty much everybody figures out. It's the whole process around it. How do you produce high quality SBOMs? How do you make a process that includes your vendors and your developers? How do you align this with the various stakeholders within your organization, that everything works together?
Okay, I mean that's a different. That's not just a hey. That's not just a best practice for you.
SBOMs are consumed by. Yeah, SBOMs are consumed by multiple stakeholders in an organization.
Right.
And so you need to make sure that how that is supposed to work. It goes beyond security to the OSPO realm, to the procurement people, to the development processes, and that's where people get stuck.
I just added that, Thomas, to the best practices section, because I think best practices and I would assume, and this is someone smarter than me can answer this, I would assume that best practices we create feeds the education. That
I think so. Yeah.
But so the one other thing, this is for probably you, David, because you're the OpenSSF. Well, maybe Kate, you might know too. So when I read Dan, what Dan and Sarah wrote around education, the first thing that popped into my mind was funding education is hard, right? Because I mean, it's just one of those things. But like the Linux Foundation has training and certification where there's, people pay, and then I assume that money helps fund new content. Is that like
No,
a potential option here?
no, I don't
No?
believe so. I'll let
Okay.
David comment. I'll let David comment, but
I work with them
yeah.
all the time. I mean, that is,
Okay.
I mean, we have in fact a whole department, training and certification. They can certainly do education and so on.
But they get
The- I'm sorry?
the content is provided by you or provided by
Right,
me. Okay.
right. They,
They,
the
they,
way
they, they don't contract people to provide content, which is what I think Josh is.
Well,
Gotcha.
actually, that's not true. They have
Oh.
and do plan. They do occasionally contract it out. We've actually had a number of courses where it's contracted out. But your overall point still stands. There's a department that does training and certification in the LF, and what they're focused in on is given content, how can we make sure that the site keeps running, that people can sign up, that they get their digital badges, that if they have a technical problem, it gets resolved. But content creation is different. They do sometimes hire it out, but the usual process, which is what Kate's hinting at, is the expectation is that somebody else is going to create the content, and then that's good. There's going to be a coordination process to get that deployed. And I would encourage, if you're trying to create some education content, work with LFT, TNC, or whoever you're going to be working with to find out, how to get deployed, because you can build your own deployment platforms for this stuff. But it turns out, like anything else in operations, making something run in operations and keeping the lights on is a big pain in the butt. And it is much better to let somebody else who actually does that as their real job deal with that. So, the course on how to develop secure software, I was the primary author with lots of help and review. My thank you. But then the TNC folks turn that into a site where people can click on, and they handle the endless browser incompatibilities and all the crazy things that happens in operations.
Mhm.
Does that make any sense? Now, they do occasionally contract out. They do in fact sometimes hire, but it is the minority case. They're usually expecting somebody else is going to make the content.
And
Gotcha.
the other thing too is a lot of the content is put out under a license that makes it possible for people to take and rework it for their own internals. For the most
Yep.
part, we try to keep things open. So that question that just got added into the notes of how can we make sure that others can use it. Basically, whenever the content is created, we just make sure it's got a license so that others can take and lift it and then redeploy it if they want to use it themselves
Nice.
internally.
Yeah, and in fact, if I may, because I've dealt with this process, so I am intimately familiar with it. Let me link off for those who aren't familiar with the secure software development fundamentals courses. Typically, we just call it the developing secure software course. But basically, if you go to that link I showed and you push the big button, you will end up at the Linux Foundation's training certification platform, where you can just go start. However, the content is posted on GitHub using a CC BY license. So anybody can, in Markdown format. So anybody can take that and tailor it, extract it. They can copy it out and do whatever they want. They just have to give us credit is all. And that's and if they want to propose changes, they go to GitHub and make a pull request and say, hey, you should change the content this way, add or change or whatever. The one exception, and it's because there are cheaters, is we can't release if there's like a test for a digital badge, we can't publicly post the test because there are bad people and they make everybody's life more miserable. But other than that, we can post it. Hopefully that exception makes sense, even though frankly we'd rather not. We that's something we can't do. So they're technically under that license, but we can't release it because of bad people. Boo.
Cool.
Yeah.
Does that answer what you wrote down, Dan? Was that your intent? of
Yeah,
that
yeah,
comment?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That's the and just to be completely transparent, Sneak have a education work stream, right? So we would be keen to make use of any of this material around SBOMs in our own education materials. And so that I just want to make sure that I'm sure many other companies that are and others outside the OpenSSF as well. Would like to make sure we want to make sure that that's available as widely as possible, I think. Yeah.
I see another hand raised.
Yep,
I've raised my hand, but somebody else is ahead of me.
Yes.
Okay, I can go first. For the education, I feel that there are already actually a lot of materials out there. Like, for example, if we go for Cyclone DX, then there's all kinds of documentation you can find for Cyclone DX, and the same goes for SPDX. And I think what's the question here is actually the vast quantity of the materials, and it's hard for one to navigate its way across this vast ocean of dotted messages here and there. So I feel the education here, it should be in the form of kind of providing a guidance for a person based on the certain user needs modeling. So for example, if I'm like a company, I have this application and I need to care about like compliance side of the product. I need to care about what kind of SBOM document is the most suitable for my own use case. And it would be great if we can have like a education in the form that it provides all the pointers to the information when we want to have more details regarding that aspect of the SBOM. And then it can also give us at the same time a kind of guideline based on why do I need SBOM, and if I need the SBOM, then what that helps me what would be best choice for me for the SBOM, and what be the practices I should in general follow when I deal with SBOM. So instead of like providing just information, it's more like organizing these already existing information into more meaningful chunks and categories, and then navigate one through this information based on what one needs out of SBOM.
I think that makes perfect sense. And I think that also applies to like best practices. Is there's going to be specific use cases and ways people want to use the tools. It amuses me when someone says something that's so obvious we all should have just known it in the first place. And this is totally one of those. Thank you. David, your hand's up.
Yeah, so first of all, I completely agree. Please don't reinvent the wheel. I always start with education. First show to me, first look and make sure that it doesn't already exist. That said, if there is something, if something doesn't exist, and I mean the broad sense, maybe the materials exist, but there's a problem with it in some way. In general, how the OpenSSF works, for those who aren't familiar with, is although we can develop from scratch, if somebody has a starting point that can help us, we are always delighted to take. I'll pick on specifically for education. We developed a course. However, we know that Intel has some interesting related courses. And so we're negotiating with them for they're planning to basically remove some of the Intel specific stuff and talking about specific areas like hardware software co-design, so and developing secure software that way in that situation. So so we're always delighted to if somebody has something there's some issues but it's a starting point, we can go from there.
Makes sense. I see Sarah just showed up. Hello, Sarah. All right. Dan, why don't we keep going? We're running out of time.
I think that's it.
Was that it? Oh, and then we have proposal summary, write-up summary of each goal and action above.
Yeah. I mean, that's where we've got to. So yeah, all this feedback is great. Sarah and I have a meeting scheduled next week. So what we'll do is we'll try and chomp through this and come back with a more fleshed out document. Okay.
Yeah, this is awesome. I really like this a lot. I think this is, and obviously, once we're done, it goes in GitHub, and then we
Yeah.
need approvals from whoever we need approvals from.
Yeah.
Cool.
Exactly. Okay.
I guess my ask then for everyone is, if you haven't looked at it, take a look. It's in the agenda. Ooh, that got big. Let me turn that somewhat normal. It is this one. Cool. All right. I want to jump down to Dan's other thing you added, the documenting SBOM user needs. And we talked about this a little bit just a minute ago, but do you want to kind of discuss more what you were thinking?
Yeah,
of
it's something
what
that
you
this
want?
came out of a discussion that we were having internally, and Max and Juju were also involved in it. We basically yeah, we were really feeling that we needed to write that a valuable output of this work stream could be a high level documentation of user needs against personas, so that we are clear about when people are using SBOMs, why they're using them. And the other thing that really is related is that we started this discussion thinking about SBOMs in scorecard, right? So there are these GitHub issues that I pointed to here, which are talking about SBOMs in scorecard. And it sounds great. Okay, we'll add SBOMs into scorecard, and that'll make scorecard even better. But it really occurred to us while we were talking about this internally that the user needs seemed to be a little bit unclear. Not that it didn't exist, but just that we wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page with regard to what the user need is when it comes to SBOMs and scorecard. And I guess you could say the same thing about tools in general. What some of the user needs are, what is excluded, what SBOMs don't do, right? And I think that's particularly becoming an issue as the concept of SBOMs proliferate, and like many tech buzzwords, people start to pick it up and think that they can apply it to their situation. It doesn't really apply. So what are they good for? What are they not good for? I think is kind of the summary. So if people agree, then I think it could kind of be part of the landscape agenda that we've been talking about, documenting the SBOM landscape. And again, we do see SBOM user needs that are articulated with specific SBOM implementations or specific tools, but we don't really have a document which talks about SBOM user needs from a general perspective.
Okay, so I have a follow-up for you, Dan. Why would we not apply that to the best practices we want to document in your work stream document?
I guess it would be the best practices need to map onto what those are, right? But it's not like a best practice is here's how to use an SBOM to do this. A user need is, user wants to do this. And right. So, it starts with the user. It starts with the user, right? And the user being, in this case, maybe it's a developer, or maybe it's a AppSec person, or maybe it's a CISO, right? And they want to achieve this goal. What's the goal the user is trying to achieve? So I see Sarah is here and on the queue.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask a clarifying question, because when you and I were building this, we we originally had the word use case in there, and
Yeah.
you had recommended swapping out the term use case for user needs. And one of the things that I want to do, and I am working with my CTO office and our security customer office, is to kind of build on an SBOM document that the Linux Foundation had done on how SBOMs are used, and start to do some customer surveys to get information about how they're using or not using SBOMs. And I wanted to bring those use cases to the conversation, because I think we've been talking about documenting a variety of use cases, but now if I think about those from user needs, that might help drive a set of questions that we would we could even put together in a side document in this working group. How would we go to various customers in Dell's supply chain, for example, and target questions about user needs versus use cases, and bring those back to the org? And I'm happy to do that. And I just wanted to say that I'm leaning into your definition of user needs versus use cases. But do we ever think that there'd be a time where we set a general use case and then we go into a subset of specific user needs, or is it better to just focus on user needs?
And to clarify, I think my definition of use case versus user needs is to some degree it's just using its vocabulary.
Right.
But I do think user need has an implication of being a little bit more high level, whereas use case is like, I want this specific feature. I want, it's use cases tend to be very very low, very kind of detail oriented. The user need is more like looking at it from the perspective of the user. Use case can often just talk about what the system does. A user need talks about why a user needs something, and so that's a kind of ideology that was a bit driven into me when I was working for UK government, actually. So I'm sorry that I'm kind of dredging it out here.
No, I think it's great. So I have like a user need might be as an incident response, vulnerability incident response, security operations team member. I need to be able to identify, use a tool where I can identify residual risk after a vulnerability is identified and closed. And then we would be able to then kind of hone in on what would the tooling need to be able to do to help address that use case or that user need. So I think there's a lot of value there.
Yeah. And what underlying role does the SBOM play in providing that tool with the information that it needs to provide you with, right? Because even as we were looking through some of the SBOMs that were being presented about the Zephyr OS, that's not like user readable information, right? So like, so anyway, it just kind of highlighted to me the fact that what we're talking about is something that's consumed by and used by tools in order to provide a certain functionality, and looking at it from that perspective, we need to think about the user needs. Sorry, I'll shut up about user needs now.
No, this is really good, Dan. I've never thought of it in this manner, but I think best practices or use cases and user needs are very different. And the thing, I need to think about this more, but my initial thought is that laying down user needs, like what Sarah just described, where she said vulnerability incident response team member, use a tool to identify, risk after vulnerability is disclosed. Like, we don't really have that ability today, but if we just focus on use cases, we're going to say something like, finding packages in your stuff using an SBOM versus here's a persona, here's their actual problem they need to solve.
Yes.
And like in this case, we can't do exactly this. We can do some of it, but this also helps us then identify here's a gap we have today. And so I think this is powerful. I feel like this is cool. I like this a lot. Why? So I guess my next question then is there a reason we don't want to just put this into the other document we're working on that's going to end up on GitHub? I don't know what to call this thing. What'd you name it? The mobilization.
I think it's more detail. I think it's more part of the, yeah, I don't think it's part of this thing, this document that we presented earlier that Sarah and I are working on. I think it's part of a landscape document that is one of the things it's pointed to. That's by that. So I think it's, and I do think it should belong on GitHub eventually, but I think it's about documenting the landscape. Maybe I'm
You
wrong.
would
Maybe
put
it's a
this in a
different thing.
landscape.
Maybe it's
User
a totally
needs.
different thing, which
Yeah,
is
I don't
SBOM
think you
user
want to do.
needs.
Yeah, user needs. I mean, a landscape's not is going to be a terrible representation for that. You want a short, simple document. Here are typical user needs. Boop, boop, boop. Briefly describe what it is. I mean,
Yeah. Okay.
I can't believe that there's not. It sounds like you're not arguing they just don't exist. You're arguing that you want.
Not at all. No, no, no. I just think they need to be brought together, and we need to kind of like look through them and say, yes, we agree. These are the user needs we're trying to address, or these are the gaps, as Josh was saying.
I mean, Kate, I'm going to pick on you here. Like, does something like this exist? You know of? I don't know of anything that talks about this in this way. Kate's still here.
We lose her.
Maybe Kate left. I don't see her.
Okay, so I'm gonna pop over to the spdx.dev website as well, just to look what they have. I mean, obviously they've got a lot of information there. So
Okay, so we're almost out of time, and I wanna tile this up before we are. So we've got the mobilization plan that Sarah and Dan are working on, and I guess the ask for everyone else here. And I will, you know what, I'm going to write down the actions and then send an email out to the list, because I think that'll be easier. Review it, right? That's for everyone. Like add your comments, and I guess speak now or forever hold your peace, because let's try to, what is it, February 28th? Let's say by the end of March, we want to get this on GitHub. Does that seem like a reasonable? One of the challenges we've had, like this SBOM Everywhere Goals and Purpose document, this has just been dragging on, and we never cut off conversation. So let's, Dan and Sarah, end of March, does that seem reasonable, or do you want more time?
I think it seems reasonable. We're going to get, 80 to 90% of the way there. And if we say, oh, let's do end of April, how much better will we get it? If we work on it for another month.
Right. And we can fix it, right? Like once it's there, we can change it. All right, cool.
I would go for, in the end, what we need is here are things to be done and an estimate of cost to bring it up for the governing board for funding. Because I think there isn't, there's limited funding, but there is an appetite to actually invest in particular in tools in this area.
Yeah.
We need to have an idea, which is also why we're running out of time, but we really need to move forward on the evaluation of the OSSS bomb generators. I believe that there is some investment needed, but it's not clear until we actually look at what the current, not just list the tool, but actually evaluate. Sorry.
Yes, and that was my question for you, David, when we get to the next one. So okay, so hold on, let me be right there. Let's not worry, the landscape funding proposal is for, we need to finish this up. I'll give it to me, Josh and Kate. We'll get that sorted before the next meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now the evaluation open source generators. What do we need to do to this, David? Like,
well, we need to actually, go a little further, take a look, and then we need to actually have some folks sit down and actually grab the generators, grab some sample code, and see, an evaluation. You have to sit down and actually try the tools on real world things and see how they're doing, because that's, I think, the part that's missing, and there's relatively little out there. Lots of people talk about this high level. I mean, it's one of the things I was wondering about why do we need another high level review of SBOMs? That's not the problem. The problem is oh, sitting down and actually evaluating the real tools so we can know what, I mean, if there's a tool that, and I'm looking specifically open source, I realize there's proprietary tools as well. And they're all, that's trying to do that also is a bridge further than I'm willing to tackle. But once we review the open source ones, the proprietary folks can use that hopefully and do that as well. But right now we're lacking key information about where the tools are, and I'm expecting that I know there are problems, but I need to understand the problems so we can figure out how to fix them.
Okay, so if I send out a mail with a call to action, can I mark you down as the contact for anyone looking to get involved?
Yes.
Perfect.
How about
Okay.
that?
Volunteers.
You were surprised by my simple direct answer, perhaps.
I expected it, and if you'd said no, I was going to find a way to trick you. So
okay. Twist my arm further.
Tom Sawyer you into it. All right, cool. And then we've got the documenting SBOM user needs. Dan, you put this in here. What do you do? What do you want to do with this one?
I wanted to have this conversation, and it sounds like there is an appetite to document SBOM user needs. And so the question then becomes, where do we do that? And David suggested user needs document, which maybe is a separate document that we need to start working on. I'm happy to start that off, and then we can, I don't know, we can work on it.
Yeah.
All right, then I'm going to create the call to action as we need volunteers. Talk to Dan. I feel that because Dan, you've got a lot of stuff on this right now, but I guess delegate if you can.
We have, that would be great.
And really step one is do that literature search first, because people have already done that. And I can actually quickly rattle off, even off the top of my head, the main use cases. I mean, I'll tell you right off, it's the, I'm worried about bringing in software, or I have software. What's my risk of known vulnerabilities? I have learned about a disaster. Log4Shell just happened. Where is it? And those are the two main security ones. And for the licensing, tell me about incompatibilities. I'm doing MA. Tell me about my risks. There's others. We can go in great depth.
All right now.
All right. We don't have to write it now. But my point, though, is that you can rattle off some pretty quickly. That's my point.
Well, you can. Like,
we need to document that. Dan, I'll help you with that, because then I want to take what we put in the user needs document and start figuring out how to talk to Dell supply chain and get some data to validate. Are we missing anything? How many people say that, and maybe put together some surveys that I can bring back to the team and share. So I'd like to help.
Awesome. Okay. And then I guess the one ask I have as well, and I'll do my best to do this, is I think if we can try to put some effort into like just saying what's going on on Slack, that could be helpful to try to move some of our efforts away from this meeting into GitHub and Slack and other things, because I feel like we are far too focused on this meeting, and that is not helpful to anyone who doesn't live in probably North America or Western Europe. So, all right. This was amazing. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Dan and Sarah. Your work is phenomenal, and I love it. I guess until next time, and I'll see you all on Slack.
Okay.
Thanks.